Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If you want to improve your playing, join me and thousands of other pickers getting better every day at pegheadnation.com. Hi, this is Matt, and you listen to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. My guest on Bluegrass Jam Along this week is Tom Nechville, who you will all know from the wonderful banjos that he makes. He's been making banjos for decades, and banjo players love them. And I'm really excited to have a chat to him. We connected last year, we met up at IBMA, and we were trying to do this before Christmas, and timing just sort of got in our way, and so it's great that we're finally getting to do this. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's great, and I'm going to, like, This is a bit of an experiment, this conversation, because normally with an interview, I will do a whole load of research. I'll have a whole load of things lined up. And I was going to do that for this one. And Tom sent me a really cool email saying, here's some things I'd like to talk about. And so I thought, right, we'll just talk about those, because that feels like a really cool starting point for a conversation. And so it's going to be an interesting one. I'm really looking forward to this. And the sort of the main starting point, really, the email you sent was explaining that you've sold your building in Minneapolis, moved your entire shop to Oregon, different climate, different setup, kind of got back to basics in some ways. And I'm fascinated to sort of know why at this point that felt like the thing to do.
Well, this has kind of been in the works for about 5 or 6 years, but it really goes back sort of to my father living in this area, and I realized what a great climate it was for building instruments. This was back, 30 some years ago, that I recognized the area, thought about moving out here even early on in my life, but never made the move. I was pretty entrenched in Minnesota, and things began to change last year. My overhead was pretty large, and my opportunity to move was coming up. It's a very, very long and complicated story, but I was able to sell my building, which was difficult because I had some tenants in the building. I had employees that needed to be dealt with. So I worked out a severance package with the employees. I sold the building. I was able to buy a building out in Oregon. And I'd been living in Oregon for about 2 years and running the shop remotely from Oregon, and then just traveling back to Minnesota on occasion. And that was not a sustainable program. So, and I think everyone knew that that was involved in my business and so on. But the final plan to move was done rather suddenly in the February of 2024. So I started moving everything out here. I got some U-Haul trucks, and I would take the truck back and forth loaded with equipment, and I managed to do it in about 5 trips. But I got everything out here. I'm in a beautiful new location, new building, and we also have a retail store. So we have both ends covered. The retail and the wholesale manufacturing is all done here in Sisters, Oregon, in 2 different buildings.
And it sounds like, I think the phrase you used in the email was, I'm returning to my passion for hands-on building of custom instruments on my own with complete control over the outcome.
Yeah. Well, during the period of time I was living here and the guys were working in Minnesota, I was not hands-on. And so the guys were doing a fantastic job, but, they still, there's a certain mojo that goes into an instrument at the very point of putting it together, choosing the bridge, making it special in its own right. I think each instrument is kind of like a living creature in a way. It has its own voice, and I kind of try to pull that out of the instrument. And for me to do it is like the most gratifying, and I'm assured, at the outcome. At least I have a confidence in my own ears when I hear an instrument, and when I feel an instrument. I really like that to be out of my own hands. And so when I think about returning to my hands-on building, it's kind of like me starting over again when I was starting in my own garage back, 40 years ago. I was struggling at that point to figure out how to do things. But now I have the benefit of the knowledge and the years of experience and every tool imaginable for the job. So it's like I've returned to those earlier times, but with all of the resources. And so it's an ideal situation currently for me. I would, like to be able to build things faster because I'm currently minimally staffed, we shall say.
How big did the team get then?
Well, there at one point I could count 9 people, including myself, and several of them were part-time people. But it was overstaffed at 6, including me, and it was apparent because I was supporting everyone, but I was not really supporting myself through various many years. I mean, there'd be times where we'd catch up and pay off loans and things like that, but it was really a like it was kind of like chasing your tail, financially. So it was a difficult situation that I was always hopeful would turn out for everyone's benefit in the way that we would be like enlarging the company to the point of efficiency. And that basically it happened to a degree, but not enough. And so the real passion of building and the passion for making an instrument is usually held closely by the builder and a few close associates. And to have a manufacturing company like a major builder, a big brand name, so to speak, it's a totally different ethos, a totally different quality mindset, and it's a business versus a passion. And so my approach to the whole bluegrass thing is to jump in with my hands, my heart, my whole body, and to be completely involved in it. And so I think that this will be more fleshed out as we talk about my overall perspective on music and where I think it fits in, with my passion for the instrument and my passion for building. I'm now in control of the building of the instruments, and it's just a much better situation. It's a more, I guess I would say, it fulfills my need for the control on the quality, and it gives me a occupation that I truly love.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? With like lots of different kind of professional pursuits, the reason you get into something, and like even as a musician, you get into being a musician because you want to play and you want to write and you want to record and you want to gig and whatever. The more successful that becomes, the less time sometimes you spend doing the thing you got into it for in the first place.
Yeah.
You've got other concerns and there's other things that take your time up, and it's a balancing act for people, isn't it? It's the money side and that need to grow with like what you got into it in the first place for.
Yeah, it's just I just feel as though things have fallen into place as they should be, and I'm still I'm able to service my customers with a lot of attention to the issue or the building project that we're working on. And I like to deal directly with people, and that could be in person or over, over the computer. But there's so much gratification to be able to work with someone, build an instrument, and you're thinking about that person while you're building the instrument. It's a more personal approach. I really feel that I can give a better value to the person. They're getting something that they really wanted.
We'll be right back with you just after this. The long-awaited Hill Country series from Collings Guitars represents a new voice in their acoustic lineup. Rooted deep in the bluegrass world, these new Dreadnought NOM models feature a strong fundamental tone with a dry, warm and woody character that's sure to catch the attention of players who hold the vintage instruments of the 30s in their highest regard. Watch world-class pickers Jake Workman, Kenny Smith and Bob Minner perform with new Hill Country instruments on the Collings Guitars YouTube channel, and learn more at collingsguitars.com. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. With 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music, Peghead Nation has something for every picker. You'll learn the tunes and techniques you need to join in at jams and play the music you love, plus advanced techniques like improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 per month, and you can add more for $10 a month. Sign up for any course and get your first month free with the promo code JAMALONG, all one word. Join thousands of other players, including me, who are advancing on their instruments and having more fun playing the roots music they love at pegheadnation.com. Yeah, it's really interesting you're talking about kind of those early stages of the build and kind of finding that instrument's voice rather than, having a sound that you try and apply to the thing, trying to, help it be what it already is going to be in a way. And it is a very personal experience as a player when you find an instrument that speaks to you in that way.
Yes, it's fun to see the people's eyes light up sometimes when they pick up an instrument, and you kind of know right away that's you can see it in their eyes that that's the one that they've chosen, and it does tend to happen that way, where you pick up an instrument and it just seems like it's going to be yours, And
you're really well known to people as somebody who's innovated a lot in the world of the banjo, like used sort of modern techniques, but also very innovative design to modernize the banjo, I guess, for want of a better phrase. Yeah. It was really interesting when we were talking about it, and you were saying that is all still very interesting to people. There'll be people who don't know the details of that maybe and haven't heard so much of it. But your head is in a slightly different place now in terms of what you see your journey with the banjo as being, and it's the innovation isn't quite as front and center as it was.
Well, I think it's a part, an accepted part of me is that I do things with an eye towards innovation if it benefits the end result of the instrument. If there's a problem to solve, and for innovation for its own sake doesn't excite me, but to solve a problem along the way with an innovative solution, that's really what I strive for. And there's a lot of clumsy designs that have been repeated over the history of the banjo, and even starting with the basic drum. The drum design, where you have a hoop held down by a bunch of hooks or bolts that will tighten down that hoop over a drum to tighten the skin. It's imperfect because if you tighten one lug more than the other, you have uneven tension, and the several hooks and tensioning devices are not spaced infinitely close. So there's always going to be variances in the head's tension in various spots of the banjo head. And no one has cared really until I came along, I think, and pointed that out, that, instruments sound better when you get the head really evenly tight. And so, assuming that the head itself is manufactured in a round and consistent manner, when you apply tension to that head evenly, it should stretch evenly. And that's the whole idea of the Nechville helical mounted banjo head. And when I say helical mounted, it comes, you think of a screwing thread or a helix, which is the tightening mechanism for the entire circumference of the banjo. So there's a threaded connection that circles the outside of the banjo, and there's a flange that turns, screwing into its frame. And it's exactly kind of like screwing the top on a mayonnaise jar, but in the case of our banjo, we're screwing the bottom of the jar into its lid, and the bottom of the jar being the threaded flange ring that's going in to tighten up the banjo. It's really simple in its most elementary form. There's only one moving part that squeezes the tension onto the banjo head. So it's about 80 fewer parts than a regular banjo, and the mechanism has proven itself out over almost 40 years of trial and error, and it's been very successful. And I'm just really proud of it. And I still think that it's the best banjo design that's ever come along. It's just that I've been pretty modest about it. I don't think I've made a huge stink out of it, because my preference is to reveal it to people as I live my life. I mean, I like going to bluegrass festivals and spending time with people, explaining what this instrument is. And I get a kick out of people's reactions when they see this for the first time, and they go, wow, they're blown away. And still to this day, people haven't really, many people haven't seen that design or understood its benefits.
It's funny you talk about it, like as a drum kind of element of the banjo, and yeah, like on a drum kit, most drums have two skins, which are still tuned with lugs in the old way, and you get an even tension and all of those things. And the only two times I've seen something similar be applied to a drum, like you get the idea of a pedal timpani or like a rototop that you turn, but they're entirely about changing the pitch rather than evening the tension. It's and it's a fascinating way of solving a problem.
Yeah, I think the rototom does tend to tighten the head, but it's not an attempt to make it even. I think there's a way to put the head on evenly, and then the rototom, like you say, changes the pitch. But it's making things easier when you're a banjo player and your head, needs tightening, for example, or if you wanted to change a head quickly. Those things are very quick and easy. But the main thing is the sound of the instrument is not at all constricted by a lot of the metal components that typically hold a banjo together. There's like coordinator rods in normal banjos that they stabilize the pot and make it strong. But sometimes they're misadjusted and cause tensions and stresses in the pot that can kind of choke off some of the potential of the richness of the banjo sound that it's capable of. And I don't have any coordinator rods at all. And so the pot, it usually consists of a tone ring sitting on a usually maple rim. And that's the banjo. It's just held in its place with the flange ring. So if it's a good sounding tone ring, you're going to get every bit of the sound of that tone ring coming through, and without any added coloring from all the metallic doodads that are on a typical banjo.
Mm. And it's really interesting what you're saying, kind of the beginning about going back after 40 years with the same passion as when you started, but a whole new bunch of tools and kind of a reinvigorated commitment to it all. What else, like over those 40 years, obviously accumulated ways of doing things and equipment, but how are you different in your approach to building a banjo now than you were 40 years ago, do you think? Is it fundamentally the same, or have you got a kind of worldview that shapes how you build now that maybe wasn't the same then?
I think I have developed opinions, and I kind of feel like good is good. There's fewer options that are satisfying to me anymore. As I get older, there's only so many banjo setups that I can play anymore. And I think I think of myself primarily as a musician. And so every instrument that I pick up, I'm kind of evaluating as a builder. And how can I improve on that instrument? I do that with everyone's instrument, but also with my own. And when they come back to the factory for a setup, for example, I will play it and quickly evaluate what it is about the instrument. And there's a small degree of tolerance in certain parameters, like how high do you want your strings off of the fingerboard? And for me, I want them a certain distance away, not too low and not too high. And there's a number that could be perfect, but there's also that can vary according to how straight the neck is as well. And I'm sorry to be getting maybe a little too technical here, but my point is that there are parameters that work. And when you're outside of those parameters, I notice them immediately and they have to be corrected. And I think that now in my career, I'm probably the best at evaluating, problems and being able to take care of them, that fast. And so that's how I've changed. I've gotten more attuned to what causes the problems, and then I can quickly address the problem. I can't think of the last time that I was stumped by an issue. And it used to be, 20, 30 years ago, we'd run into more problems that were mysteries. And now I think the experience has proven helpful over the years.
And is the demand for like the banjo different? Do people view it differently than they did 40 years ago? Because the kind of, over the past few decades, bluegrass and string band music has become phenomenally popular. Not just people to buy and listen to, but also affordable instruments are much more readily available now than they were 40 years ago. And, an entry level guitar or mandolin or banjo is an easier thing to find. Is the way people sort of approach wanting an instrument different now, do you think?
Yeah, I think that touches on the demand situation. And boy, this really brings up a lot in my head right now, because I'm thinking about my entire career of, wanting the banjo market to be as popular and as expansive as a guitar market would be. I thought about the banjo as the way it was and the way I would wish it could evolve to. And I always wished the banjo to be more of a mainstream instrument. I wished for it to be heard in contemporary music, and not only in its traditional environment of bluegrass. But I'd love to hear the banjo when I was growing up in the Eagles, or with the Doobie Brothers, or Jim Croce, or anybody else that had a banjo and it wasn't considered bluegrass. That's kind of where my ears would perk up and think, that instrument has a lot of potential, and I'd like to see it expand its role in music. And so I thought about the instrument and what was holding it back, and that's kind of the motivation that got me into building and rebuilding the banjo. I think I saw a lot of like antiquated, sort of stereotyped problems with the banjo, like you can't keep it in tune. It's a hillbilly instrument. It's backward or unsophisticated. Well, it's not anymore. I've changed the banjo, at least the Nechville banjo. The name I gave it was Heli-Mount banjo because it describes a different mechanical way of getting the banjo to work. And I wanted a name that would differentiate it from the regular banjo and make it apparent that it's a helical mount, not a multi-lug hook and nut style banjo. But I'm sorry, I probably just got off the beaten path here, but I do hope I answered your question a little bit there.
Yeah, and is that because I remember you sort of talking a bit about that idea of having wanted to really expand the awareness and perception of the banjo, and like with a sort of more kind of experienced perspective, I guess. Also, then being able to look back a bit about the history and the context and some of the, you sort of come full circle of it.
Yeah, yes. My sister was a fellow dreamer with me along the early stages of the development of my banjo, and she and I used to make bets about when bluegrass was going to make it big. And I remember one of our bets was when was Alison Krauss going to appear on the cover of Time magazine, and I think that actually happened. And we were always predicting things that would happen, and maybe we can get Steve Martin to buy one of our banjos. Well, that came to pass. Well, maybe Bruce Springsteen would have one of our banjos in his band. Well, that happened too. It's like Bela Fleck, Alison Brown. They're in our history, and they're friends, and they're people that are familiar with what I do, and I think they respect what I have to offer. And looking back on it all, it's like, wow, these things have happened, and the banjo has gotten more popular. I've been part of it. I've been wishing for it, and I've been working towards it, and I've been trying to advance ideas in the banjo world, some of which are actually being adopted by other builders too. So I'm really gratified, that a lot of these predictions and popularities that I dreamed about only back in the early 80s, or mid 80s, late 80s, bluegrass wasn't quite as cool as it is now, and everybody's doing it. And so, and it's proved, I think, that it's a good thing for people. The whole jamming situation and the social aspects of it. That's what I really gravitate towards, and that's the stuff that makes me feel warm and fuzzy, like I'm doing a good thing in the world.
Well, and you look at what's going on right now, and the person who is knocking down walls and redefining things and doing his own thing and bringing people to string band music all over again is Billy Strings, and you've been working with Billy Failing on his signature model in recent years. So you're right in the thick of all that as well.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to, have been in the right place at the right time for exposing my ideas to some of these guys. And it tends to happen that people will pick up the Nechville, and if they get a, they their perception changes a little bit. They kind of feel more comfortable with that instrument. It's sometimes hard to go back to other instruments, but I'm really happy that Billy Failing has picked it up. It definitely, that's the most meaningful movement, I think, that bluegrass has seen in many years, and it's real meaningful too. And it's a true. These people are genuine, and they're great musicians. They're dedicated to the thing that makes us all like a big bluegrass family, and it's not fake. It's just it's so real, and it's something that we can depend on, and always go back and listen to, and then learn how to play it too. It's like it's endless fun, and keeps me engaged on a daily basis.
And I think that's one of those words that crops up all the time talking about this music is community or family, or words that are to do with connection is always a theme of, because I think it's one of those musics that there's not a strong distinction between the audience and the musicians, because most of the audience are also musicians, and most of the musicians came up through those social circles in the first place. So it feels like a wonderfully level and inclusive world.
Yeah. That's exactly the thought. And my partner Linda is starting an organization called Cascade Bluegrass, and the theme of her, and I'm part of this too, but the theme is really building community, but with a special emphasis towards helping bands. And so bands, for example, in order to get booked at even local festivals, sometimes have to be recognized at an official venue like IBMA. And it's very expensive to go from Oregon to North Carolina or Tennessee to IBMA. And so we're trying to help. We're starting out with sending one band there in our first year, and then next year we'll choose another band or more than one band and try to fundraise for them to get them out to be able to be seen and then get hired more around the area. And we're also working with some other organizations that do jams, and there's some really interesting college outreaches that are being talked about and started. And so there's a lot more besides building that we're focused on surrounding this community building. And we're in a town here in Sisters, Oregon. It's kind of known as an arts community, and there's a lot of musicians here, and a great community for the music. So we go to a local Himalayan restaurant called High Camp, and there's jams on most Monday nights, and so all the musicians in town show up there, and that's a really fun time. As an example of one of the community building things that we do.
Well, and you mentioned sort of IBMA as well, and you said earlier on that you really like going to festivals and kind of just being face to face with the players, and so it must be as a builder just getting to put your instrument in somebody's hands or something like that and see their physical reaction to it must be wonderful.
Yeah, it's hard to just have that one moment to put an instrument in someone's hands. Sometimes it clicks and it's like the person is really turned on right away. Other times that you need to have maybe a few days with an instrument to really know if it's going to work for you in various situations. But it's so helpful to have these trade shows like IBMA. I used to go to the NAMM show, which I don't do anymore just because I think that I've developed a strong enough market that I can continue without having to sell through retailers as much. But I'm sideline here. I'm direct to consumer on most of my sales, and so you don't want to be shy. If you want to buy a banjo, you can actually call me directly, or if you want to talk about it or see what I have in stock, I would be happy to send you pictures of whatever I have and videos of what I have.
And that's really interesting because, you know, something like working with Billy Failing often is the kind of thing that a big business will do, and they'll crank out the numbers, and that is more about a kind of endorsement situation and attaching the name to a thing as it is a direct relationship with providing the instrument that musician is going to play on stage every night. And so that must be a really kind of exciting avenue to have somebody kind of do that without it being we now need to make 30,000 of these things and send them out around the world.
Yes. There's a small, I'm a niche within a niche. I'm a small banjo builder in a small instruments world, but there are corporations that want to latch on to famous musicians, and I think that Billy Strings qualifies as a super famous band that a corporation would love to take advantage of somehow. In my case, I'm just lucky to have friends that like my banjos. It's not a corporate thing, and there's no major like endorsement deals going on. It's just like, okay, well, he gave me enough money to cover the cost of the banjo, and I am happy that he's playing it. He got a good deal, but he knows that he can call me for follow-up service and parts and whatever other instruments he might need. I'm ready to go, to help him out any way I can, because I do recognize how nice it is to have that relationship. And I hope that everyone that plays one of my instruments will feel comfortable in the same relationship, and whether they're famous or not. I mean, I treat everyone pretty much the same.
Is there any sort of different consideration when you're building a banjo that is going to be put through a PA every night and potentially playing in stadiums and arenas rather than little? Is there anything you do to that banjo with that in mind, or do you just build a banjo with great tone and then work out other ways to do that?
Well, I thought when you mentioned the arenas and having an instrument that's built for those big shows, originally my thoughts were all about electrifying the banjo in those situations, and that happened with the Dixie Chicks, where they, for a number of years, they were using an electric banjo in their shows. They would be in these giant hockey arenas filled with screaming teenage girls, and the banjo was difficult to amplify. The acoustic banjo just didn't work in those situations. So I was able to outfit her with a really nice electric banjo that did the job for a number of their tours, and then they went to more of a acoustic-based show. So I was able to put pickups and into the instruments and customize them for stage readiness for the big shows. So really, you need a good built-in pickup. And that being said, there's a number of options for amplifying a banjo, but You make it as acoustically as fine as you can and get it as comfortable to play as possible. And then you worry about amplifying it. And for a Nechville banjo, I can install a Fishman pickup, a piezo pickup, or my proprietary pickup was called a warp drive pickup, and that is a dual source pickup that spring loaded, fits inside the banjo, and it works really well. And you can kind of balance between the piezo sound and the magnetic pickup that's in there. So that's the electrifying an instrument is a big can of worms that is there's many ways of doing it. Let's just put it that way. Mm. And it depends so much on the room that you're trying to amplify it in, and having a good control of your sound is essential if you're a pro player playing out in front of those big audiences.
Yeah, and I was thinking as we were talking about the rise in popularity of bluegrass and Billy String's role in all of that. The other thing I know you mentioned was the big rise in popularity of old time music now as well, alongside as a kind of sort of parallel but separate world. They overlap a lot, and a lot of people are involved in both worlds. But it's becoming a real thing, isn't it?
Yes, and so we've responded. Back when we started seeing more popularity of the open back banjo, we came out with one called the Atlas, and it kind of takes a design from the 1800s. It's called an Ashbourne pot, and the unique thing about that banjo was that the flange component that normally would be a metal part on a modern banjo is a wood. It's extended wood around the perimeter of the banjo that you would drill for the bracket hardware to go through, and it makes for a very lightweight and very strong body. And so it was an idea taken from history, and in a way I consider it to be really innovative. But we managed to make it really more innovative by having our flux capacitor connector to the Atlas pot, so you can use a regular Nechville neck on this interesting old time pot body. So the aesthetics are right. It's a really old looking banjo that has modern features of an adjustable neck, and we quite often will use the radiused fingerboard. There's a little bit of a lag between the old time player and the tech savvy, up to the minute, state of the art banjo player. The old time player doesn't look for innovations in playability and sound as much as a bluegrass player would. But there's many things that an old-time player doesn't even know about that could help their playing, make their playing a little more accurate. Perhaps maybe a radiused fingerboard would aid in the right hand as well as the left hand. Not only does the neck feel a little more comfortable with a radius neck, but when you're doing clawhammer strokes across the strings, your strings are sitting more on a arc like a fiddle bridge would have. And so you're hitting strings that are a little more accessible, and it leads to less mistakes. And I've heard that it was not my theory. It's something that players have told me over the years, that a radiused bridge helps them make fewer mistakes. How did we get there, Matt? Well, you ask great questions. They just lead me into talking about everything.
Well, I love that, though. We were talking about old-time music and sort of how that, the growth in popularity has alongside
Mm-hmm.
bluegrass just rocketing, and that's another interesting one because it's another very community, even maybe in some ways
Yeah.
musically, it is a very communal thing because largely people are
Yeah.
playing the tune together. It's not as individual a thing as bluegrass.
Yeah. That's right. It's a different thing. You're all playing together, I think. I haven't had as many experiences doing that because our tradition in the bluegrass world is, of course, taking breaks between various instruments around the circle, and the old time approach is all at once, right?
Yeah, much more like the sort of the Irish music approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely have experienced the Irish jams and really had a lot of fun in that environment. I've been over to Europe several times, and there's a festival in Denmark that was, I think it's Tonderfest, I think it was. And I played a lot of Celtic and Irish music there all night with all the musicians, and it was just, boy, those memories will stick with me for a long time. But I definitely I see the influence of old time music, and the old time banjo specifically is quite popular for many reasons. Women are getting into the banjo at bigger numbers than ever, but of course the bluegrass banjo is much heavier and it's a little bit bigger with the resonator too, and so the open back tends to be more friendly to a lot of females that want to pick up a lighter weight instrument and one that fits their body a little bit better. It's nice to have a open back lightweight banjo, and so we've like there are options in Nechvilles that take you there, but we're sort of specializing in what's next and what are they going to want in their next banjo, and what are people going to want in their next banjo. And so we've thought about what's going to happen with the old time crowd, people that are playing old time music. They might, in many cases, they want to expand that, and they want to take it. They want to learn some 3-finger picking, for example, or maybe they want to add some other techniques. And maybe they want to add a resonator to it and have a banjo that can do both. So that's something that we've thought about. And we do have one banjo called the Excelsior. And I'm sorry, this is not an advertisement. I'm just trying to let you know that we've thought about this. And there's a banjo that has a pop-on resonator that can come on or off. And that's been pretty fun to have for the few people that are really doing both. It gives them an opportunity to kind of get two different sounds in one instrument.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because you think about other instruments like, in mandolin, you get an oval hole or the F hole and they're different sounds, but you have to have two different instruments. And the idea that an open back banjo and a resonator banjo are not that far apart in many ways. It's, the idea of a hybrid that you can suit to whatever it is you're doing that day or that particular tune even.
Yeah. It's, you have I've played all my life in the 3-finger technique, and I get a clawhammer sound just with my picks on by using my other 2 fingers, my, pinky and ring finger. I do a lot of brushing, on the strings to kind of emulate a kind of a clawhammer type sound, but nowhere near the efficiency of a regular, adept clawhammer player. But I will use those fingers for that brush style just to kind of expand the possibilities that I can hear in a 3-finger performance, and backup playing. You can do so many things in backup playing that without being distracting, that you can support the music in so many different ways. So I found that, the kind of brushing techniques and kind of strumming techniques, when used at the right time, can be really supportive to like a guitar solo, or when someone else is taking a break. I have a wide palette of things that I can do, and having that old time strum in there is kind of is a nice little tool in the toolkit.
Yeah, and it's nice to. I always enjoy things that cross the lines a bit, and there's all the different techniques you can use, and it's. I think it's fascinating. We tend to think of instruments as being a tool for a specific job sometimes, and go, well, that's how you do this, and that's how you do that, and like historically, often in string bands, people just played what they could get hold of, and it's become codified that you need an F-style mandolin and a dreadnought and but it's fun seeing things move away from that again. Mm-hmm. People just play what they want to play.
Yeah, definitely.
And so moving back to Oregon, downsizing back to being much more hands-on, like feels like a really interesting, the way you talk about it. It almost feels like a start again, as much as a kind of like a new chapter.
Well, if you've ever moved a factory before, you know what I'm talking about in the amount of work involved. The logistics of moving without breaking machines and things like that. How do you get a big, lathe onto a pickup truck? Well, you got to find somebody with a forklift, and then when you get into the new location, there's a lot of setup and electrical work, and so I've been putting a lot of time into setting up the shop and getting it functional. It took me a while to build a spray booth. I've got a nice spray booth that's exhausted out, and I have I've spread out my machines. I have plenty of room, and there's projects going on at various stages all around the shop. And I'm still working on making it more efficient, let's say, putting things in the right places where you can go from one job to another and sort of get a workflow going. And it's still my dream is to be able to be super efficient and quickly build instruments with the highest quality possible. And, and that dream is, it's on its way. It's working. There's always improvements that you can make. And that's what I'm doing, is analyzing the shop and, making sure that everything is in its right place. And I got my most important piece of equipment just this weekend. It's a ping pong table. Mm-hmm. So I'm ready to entertain guests to challenge me on the table too.
Excellent. And so, how many instruments would you be likely to build, do you think, in the typical month, just working as a one-man team?
Probably about 6. But I'm shipping variously. Sometimes I'm shipping 3 or 4 a week. But that's not building 3 or 4 a week. But I'm finishing or sending out sometimes 3 or 4 a week. So a typical week, I'd probably ship 1 or 2. But yeah, there's a lot of inventory that I already have. So if someone's looking to build from scratch, I might be able to take a neck that's already halfway done and turn it into a perfect instrument for that customer. Sometimes there's an in-stock instrument that I can show off that will attract the attention of a potential buyer. So I do have a pretty good inventory of pre-built stock and partially built stock. keeps the time down.
Yeah. Well, it sounds fascinating. It sounds like you're at a fascinating point in the journey. Like 40 years in, it's, you know, the passion is there, and the desire to improve things and keep building and keep momentum, and you know, it's fascinating to listen to. And I'm just really pleased we found time to do this, because we've been talking about doing this for months now. So I'm glad we actually did. It's been really cool talking to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure, and keep up the good work.
Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.